Bhakti Vinodashaya Bhakti Vinodashaya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
एवं विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शताष्ट श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस अबाई चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। नित्य लीला प्रविष्णु ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शताष्ट श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस श्रील भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर गोस्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास रघुनाथ षट गोस्वामी की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड श्री गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। श्री वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की जय। श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप धाम की जय। पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। The most merciful Lordship श्री श्री किशोर किशोरी की जय। परम करुणा श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्र महारानी की जय। गंगामाई यमुनामाई की जय। भक्ति देवी श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद ट्रांसेंडेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन की जय। युग धर्म श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की जय। श्री हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। समावेत भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Got those? Or not? You. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Bhaja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Bhaja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Asto Tadasati Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Nitai Gaura Premanandi Haribo Namo Vishwadaya Kisvasakula Sadhguna Jampurveti Namane Namaste Satsvara Devi Gauravani Pacharna Nivase Sunivali Vasjajati Satane Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 28, Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. Text number 51. Tatra purvatara kaschit Saka brahmana atmavan Santvayan valguna samna Tammaha rudatim prabho Tatra purvatara kaschit Shaka brahmana atmavan Santvayan valguna samna Tammaha rudatim prabho. Tatra puvatara kaschit Saka brahmana atmavan Santvayam valguna samna Tamaha rudatim prabho. Tatra purvatara kaschit Saka brahmana atmavan Santvayam valguna samna Tamaha rudatim prabho. Tatra purvatara kaschit Saka brahmana atmavan Santvayan valguna samna Tamaha rudatim prabho. Ladies. Tatra purvatara kaschit Saka brahmana atmavan Santvayan valguna samna Tamaha rudatim prabho. Tatra purvatara kaschit Saka brahmana atmavan Santvayan valguna samna Tamaha rudatim prabho. Tatra purvatara kaschit Saka brahmana atmavan Santvayan valguna samna Tamaha rudatim prabho. Tatra, in that place, purvataraha, previous, kaschit, someone, shaka, friend, brahmanaha, a brahmana, atmavan, very learned scholar, santvayan, pacifying, balguna, by very nice, samna, mitigating words, tam, unto her, aha, he said, rudatim, while she was crying, Prabho, my dear king. My dear king, one Brahmana who was an old friend of King Puranjana came to that place and began to pacify the queen with sweet words. Purport. The appearance of an old friend in the form of a Brahmana is very significant. In his Paramatma feature, Krishna is the old friend of everyone. According to Vedic injunction, Krishna is sitting with the living entity side by side. According to the Shruti mantra, Tva Supana Sayuja Sakayaha, the Lord is sitting within the heart of every living entity as Suhrit, the best friend. The Lord is always eager to have the living entity come home back to Godhead. Sitting with the living entity as witness, the Lord gives him all chances to enjoy himself materially, but whenever there is an opportunity, the Lord gives good counsel and advises the living entity to abandon trying to become happy through material adjustment and instead turn his face toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrender unto Him. When one becomes serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, his resolution is tantamount to seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As explained before, this means meeting the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the instruction of the spiritual master. This is technically called Vani Seva. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states in his Bhagavad Gita commentary on the verse, Vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kuru nandana, Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, text 41, that one should serve the words of the spiritual master. The disciple must stick to whatever the spiritual master orders. Simply by following on that line, one sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is a long purport. We'll read on. Okay, so everybody got that bit? Who can tell me what was the main point in that last paragraph? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. But it's very interesting because Prabhupada first of all talks about Krishna in the form of the Paramatma. But then very halfway through the paragraph he talks about following the order of the spiritual master. Which indicates that they're not different. You know, the presence of the super soul and the presence of the spiritual master. Anyway, we'll read on. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma, appeared before the Queen as a Brahmana. But why didn't he appear in his original form as Sri Krishna? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks that unless one is very highly elevated in loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot see him as he is. Nonetheless, if one sticks to the principles enunciated by the spiritual master, somehow or other he is in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since the Lord is in the heart, he can advise a sincere disciple from within. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, text 10. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhijogam tam jainamam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Have you got one of those new Bhagavad Gitas here with the orangey kind of a cover? Just yeah, that's it. Let's just have a quick look. They've gone and changed these books. You know that? I was just reading it the other day. I know. To those who are constantly devoted. Oh, isn't that interesting? To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love. The previous translation used to be, the one that I learnt when I was a new devotee. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love. Interesting, huh? I give the understanding by which they can come to me. That's the same. Interesting. I'd never read this Bhagavad Gita before. Well, I've read the Bhagavad Gita before, but not this particular edition. In conclusion, if a disciple is very serious to execute the mission of the spiritual master, he immediately associates with the Supreme Personality of Godhead by Vani or Vapu. You know, if you're ever looking, I mention this almost every class I give, but if you're ever looking for the main point of Prabhupada's purports, then there are some giveaway lines. And one of them is, in conclusion, right? Or another one that Prabhupada says, therefore. So here's our main point here, supported by the previous paragraph. Now listen to this. Okay, this is very important. Listen to this. In conclusion, if a disciple is very serious to execute the mission of the spiritual master, he immediately associates with the Supreme Personality of Godhead by Vani or Vapu. This is the only secret of success in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What does that mean? This is the only secret of success in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Got that? We'll be coming back to that later. Instead of being eager... Now listen to this, Prabhupada, these purports are actually quite... Well, all of Prabhupada's purports, but this one's very... There's a bit of humour in here as well. Instead of being eager to see the Lord in some bush of Vrindavan, while at the same time engaging in sense gratification, if one instead sticks to the principle of following the words of the spiritual master, he will see the Supreme Lord without difficulty. Well, Srila Bilva Mangala Thakur has therefore said, Bhaktis tvayi stiratara Bhagavan yadi syad Daivena na falati divya kishora murti mukti swayam mukulitanjali sevate sman dharmartha kama gatayaha samaya pratikshaha. If I am engaged in devotional service unto you, my dear Lord, then very easily can I perceive your presence everywhere. And as far as liberation is concerned, I think that liberation stands at my door with folded hands waiting to serve me, and all material conveniences of dharma, religiosity, artha, economic development, and calm, sense gratification, stand with her. Krishna Karanamrita, text 107. If one is very highly advanced in devotional service, he will have no difficulty in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one engages in the service of the spiritual master, he not only sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but attains liberation. As far as material conveniences are concerned, they automatically come, just as the maidservants of a queen follow the queen wherever she goes. Liberation is no problem for the pure devotee, and all material conveniences are simply awaiting him at all stages of life. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmaye Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stapitam Jena Bhuktale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Svapadantikam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Gurim Yat Kripa Tamaham Mande Sri Gurum Dinatarinam. So, Krishna wants us to come back home, back to Godhead. And he is travelling with us in the form of the Super Soul since the time that we entered the material world. And he's been witnessing all of our activities, patiently waiting for that time when we will turn to him and seek his good counsel. Because the material world is not our natural habitat, if you like. It is a place of suffering. Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, was it Jamma Mritya Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Dosha Anudarshanam? One who sees in the line of the parampara, understands the realities of material existence, and that it is ultimately very, very painful. But in illusion, pleasure in a place where it doesn't really exist, as Prabhupada explains, pleasure in the material world is simply the mitigation of suffering. You know, if you think about material existence, or meditate on the body, there, using the example of our thumb, as a simple example. How much pleasure can you get out of your thumb? Very much pleasure? Right? But just, you can suck your thumb. As a child, we get pleasure out of sucking our thumb. And there's certain, thumbs are quite handy, they're quite useful. But just imagine how much pain you can inflict upon someone. Just stick it and bang it with a hammer once. Right? Whoa! So much pain. The amount of pleasure that we can experience in material existence in relationship with the amount of pain and suffering that we experience. There's an imbalance. Yet people don't see that. There's an imbalance, but people are still pursuing the material pleasures, thinking that's going to make them happy, but actually it's an illusion. Real happiness exists when we're free from this dukkha, dosha, the janma, mrityu, jara, vyadhi. And of course, in the beginning of this chapter, and this is the story of Puranjana, illustrates the suffering of material existence and the consequences of material attachments. And that's witnessed here in the disappearance of Puranjana, because now his wife is lamenting, right? Feeling the pain of separation from her husband. And in that circumstance then, the Sakka Brahmana Atmavan, the friendly, learned Brahmana appears. At the time of bereavement, a person is in a very sensitive state, sensitive position. And it's easy then to instruct them in spiritual knowledge. Because at the time of the passing of a friend or a relative or somebody close, then people see the reality of material existence. Here's what happens. At the end, everything is just reduced to dust or ashes. So what's the point? What's the point of existence? We strive so hard to accumulate material possessions and to become happy. But then what's the end result? It all just ends up with death. What's the point? So that state, that's... I remember when I was 16, I read the book Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, and the Buddha, before he achieved enlightenment, saw that he was protected. He lived in a very protected environment, never saw any suffering. But then one day he was out hunting, and he saw a dead body, which was a shock. And it was a deep realization that he had, that this is all life ends in. I remember after reading this book, I went to my mother and I said, I had some realizations, and I said, all life is you die. So I might as well kill myself now. Because my mother was very shocked. Oh no. And sometimes I wasn't really seriously contemplating suicide, but I was thinking about, just thinking about the reality of material existence. What does it all end in? What does it culminate in? And this happens to, young people, even older people, but some people come to this realization, and they do. That it's very confronting, and so they commit suicide, not seeing any real hope. Right? But anyway, at this point, the Lord is appearing in a form of the friendly, learned Brahmana. And of course, the friendly, learned Brahmana is also the spiritual master. The person who can lead us out of this material conception of life and in our state of, in a state of renunciation or in a state of disgust or despair or disillusionment with material existence. The spiritual master appears and gives instruction. We could, or we can, conceivably, theoretically, take instructions directly from Krishna. That's what Prabhupada is saying here. The Lord is, what is it? Ishvaraha Savabhutanam Hriddesha Arjuna Tishtati Brahmayan Savabhutanam Jantra Rudhani Mayaya. Krishna's present within the heart of everybody. And He's directing all of our wanderings. He knows our most intimate secrets. He's right next to us. But how many, hands up all those in the room here who have a direct connection with the Super Soul and who are being guided by Him? Please raise your hands. Okay. Nobody. Theoretically, we should be, if we are sufficiently connected with Krishna, then He can directly instruct us. There's that story of Prabhupada being interviewed by a newspaper reporter with Rameshwara, then Swami. You heard that? Know that story? And the newspaper reporter asked Prabhupada, how are you guided by Krishna? And Prabhupada said, Krishna directly speaks to me. And the newspaper reporter questioned him. Wanted a clarification. Rameshwara says, he's inspired. And Prabhupada says, no, Krishna directly speaks to me. So, here. Sitting with the living entity as witness, the Lord gives him all chances to enjoy himself materially. But whenever there is an opportunity, the Lord gives good counsel and advises the living entity to abandon trying to become happy through material adjustment and instead turn his face toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrender unto Him. And because we're not purified, we're not capable of receiving direct instruction from Krishna. We may be, inspired to act, but it is not like Prabhupada, directly being told by Krishna what to do. And so then what does Prabhupada say here? When one becomes serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, his resolution is tantamount to seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How important, this is an indication of how important the relationship between the disciple and the guru actually is. And we were discussing yesterday how Krishna manifests in various forms as the spiritual master. He can manifest in the form of the Vatma Padashika Guru, the person who shows us the way, or then as Siksha Gurus, those who instruct us on how to make spiritual progress. And then as Krishnadas Kaviraj, Prabhupada points out in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, usually, although it doesn't always follow in ISKCON, but usually one person, one of those Siksha Gurus, becomes prominent in a devotee's life, and then usually that's the person that one takes initiation from. And it's not uncommon for that person to be then the significant or prominent guide throughout one's life. Although that's not always the case. Lord Chaitanya had disciples, but then he would, like Raghunath Das was was a disciple of Lord Chaitanya. And yet, Lord Chaitanya gave him to Swarup Damodar. And so he was actually instructed by Swarup Damodar, even though he was a disciple of Lord Chaitanya. So, it's not always that the initiating guru is the prominent instructor. It can be others. But one person will, or one person, may not always be one person, it can be a couple of people, become then the mercy incarnation of the Lord, who directs the aspiring devotee on their progressive path of Krishna consciousness. And the instructions of that person are taken as good as coming from Krishna. And so Prabhupada says here, as explained before, we were discussing this yesterday, this means meeting the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the instruction of the spiritual master. Must have been a tough night last night. I always feel a bit tired after a Ekadasi. Do you experience that? Because you haven't been eating grains to keep you fully nourished and energized. So the Dwadasi morning program is a bit of an austerity. Because you'll be, especially in a Bhagavatam class, it's the last leg before the nectar for which we're always anxious, which is breakfast. So it's okay. If you're nodding off or whatever, it's all right. Or put it this way, it's not unusual. May not be all right, but it's not unusual. So then Prabhupada says here, this is technically called Vani Seva. There's two types of service to the spiritual master. There's the service to the vapu or the form, and then there's service to the instructions. Both are important. We should take up the opportunity to serve the spiritual master when he's physically present. But Prabhupada says, in the absence of the spiritual master, then the words, the instructions of the spiritual master are the pride of the disciple. Right? And so, serving the instructions of the spiritual master is more important, because one can serve the instructions of the spiritual master whether he's with the spiritual master or not. And when the spiritual master is not present, then that's the means by which one serves the Guru. And as Prabhupada explains here, when we serve the Guru, then that's as good as serving Krishna. This is the miracle, if you like, of devotional service. That by rendering service to the spiritual master, we're actually rendering service to Krishna. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasada yasya prasada nagati katopi. By the mercy of Krishna, we get the spiritual master. And then by the mercy of the spiritual master, we're connected to Krishna. This is our the mystical process of Krishna consciousness. And then, there are so many instructions, as we mentioned yesterday. There are the practical, chanting 16 rounds, following the regulative principles. Kirtan, worshipping the deity. Reading Srila Prabhupada's books. I was reading some of instructions In the Sikshamrita, Prabhupada is saying we should read at least twice a day. Of course, Prabhupada established that in the Srimad Bhagavatam class and also in the Bhagavad Gita class in order to get everybody to hear. Of course, reading is really a form of hearing. Reading what Prabhupada has spoken is a form of hearing. Rendering some service, some practical service based on our natural proclivities to serve. Now, all of these things Prabhupada mentions. Prabhupada mentioned in one letter, going to the arti. There are a number of things that Prabhupada mentions, and then he says, if you do these, then Krishna will personally present himself to the disciple. So this is the potency of following the order of the spiritual masters. It directly connects us with Krishna. Now, Prabhupada mentions here also, there is another way of getting Krishna's instructions or Krishna's inspiration, and that is by the rendering of service. Krishna within the heart will also reveal himself and reveal the way in which one can make progress. And Prabhupada quotes the verse here, Tesham satata yuktanam, to those who constantly engaged in devotional service, bhajatam pritipurvakam, with love, who worship me with love, or in the new version of the Bhagavad Gita, who serve me with love. I give them the understanding by which they can come to me. So, when we engage in the process of devotional service, then Krishna becomes inclined towards the devotee. Prabhupada said that if we take one step towards Krishna, then he takes 10 steps towards us. So when one is very serious, Prabhupada mentions here, if a disciple is very serious to execute the mission of the spiritual master, he immediately associates with the Supreme Personality of Godhead by Vani or Vapu. And then, as I mentioned before, this is the only secret of success in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then a nice little, instead of being eager to see the Lord in some bush of Vrindavan, while at the same time engaging in sense gratification, if one instead sticks to the principle of following the words of the spiritual master, he will see the Supreme Lord without difficulty. Prabhupada says, instead of being eager to see Krishna, work in such a way so that Krishna will see you. And then Krishna will reveal himself. Then at the end of this purport, Prabhupada mentions, quoting Bilva Mangala Thakur, if one serves Krishna in this way, then automatically all of the other facilities and conveniences of material life will be provided for the devotee. And he quotes the verse from Bilva Mangala Thakur. All material conveniences of dharma, artha, karma and moksha are provided. Liberation is automatically provided. One is religious. Economic development is provided, and one's desires are automatically satisfied. Yeah. Okay. I might finish here. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Woo. Boo-boo. Here's our connection.
Thank you for class, Prabhu. Thank you very
Hare
much.
Krishna.
Regarding getting in, Krishna speaking with us.
Yeah.
Isn't Krishna always speaking with us? I mean, Krishna is next to us as our best friend. And as our best friend, he's acting as our best friend. And so isn't Krishna always speaking with us? And the question is our learning how to listen, not just listening, but learning how to listen. And in Krishna's great love, Krishna has given us the opportunity for clarity that is essential to us in our Guru. But learning to listen to Krishna is like a baby learning to listen, and sounds begin to make sense, and after rehearsing and practicing and all kinds of effort, the baby learns to understand what mom and dad are saying.
Yeah.
And it's not that mom and dad aren't speaking to the baby all the time, but it takes time to learn.
Yeah. Good point. Krishna's speaking to us, but we're too dull-headed to listen. Yep, I can relate to that. Next. Nice point, thank you. That was a comment, it wasn't a question, was it? No, it's very pertinent, very relevant comment. Krishna is talking to us, we're too thick-headed to listen.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhupada mentions in the purport that one who serves the mission of the spiritual master, right? It says in conclusion, one who serves the mission, I forget the exact language, but the idea is that,
when one becomes serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, his resolution is tantamount to seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Right. And my question was, sometimes we see that based on our own level of surrender, the spiritual master will only give us a certain type of instruction because they know this is where you're at. So I was wondering, if we become, how do we ever understand the mission of the spiritual master? Because it seems that we have to be fully surrendered before the spiritual master will actually tell us.
How do we what?
How do we understand the mission of the spiritual master? Because it seems like a specific thing can't just be, we can't just do anything and say, well, this is the mission of the spiritual master. So it has to be something very specific. Mm-hmm. So how do we ever know what that is? Because it seems that they'll only tell us as much as, as they know that we can actually follow and do.
Well, depending on the stage at which a devotee is at, or has matured to, if you like. Right. Usually we'll encourage a novice, or in ISKCON terms, I think, neophyte, right? We'll encourage them to do some fairly basic things. What are those basic things? Wash the pots. That's quite advanced, actually. Washing the pots is very elevated. It appears to be menial, but actually it's very advanced, washing the pots. But what I mean is, there are some basic sadhana principles that we get everybody to follow. Chant rise early in the morning, attend a Mangalatik, worship the deity, chant your rounds. There's some basic devotional practices that every one of us does, to be brought up to a level of a sadhaka. Right? So that's the kind of instruction, that's the beginning instructions that we might receive. And then, we may be fortunate to wash the pots. We might get some engagement, wash the pots or whatever. That'd be our great good fortune, because that directly then serves the mission of the spiritual master. But before one can, be elevated to that point of doing service and being steadily situated in a service that serves the mission of the Guru, one has to become fixed up. So we'll be given instructions that will, if the spiritual master is skillful and sensitive to the needs of the disciple at that stage of immaturity, then they'll develop them to the point where they become steady sadhakas. Right? Then when a person is a steady sadhaka, then we engage them according to their nature. Initially we might give them some boot camp training. Right? Wash the pots, this, that or the other thing. But actually any service that we render to the deities, to the Sankirtan mission, whatever, it's actually very elevated activity, especially if it's connected to the mission of the spiritual master, which basically means preaching, means connecting others to Krishna. That's really what we were reading in the Bhagavad Gita the other day. Prabhupada was talking about a superior Vaishnava. A superior Vaishnava is one who tries to give others an opportunity to engage in devotional service. Those who are not engaged in devotional service, a superior Vaishnava tries to give them an opportunity to be engaged in Krishna's service. That's our natural position, original and natural position. So when a person becomes, what we would call fixed up, then the Guru will no longer be giving instructions on how to become a steady sadhaka, but I want you to now then do this service or that service. Do you know what I mean? And then, we may be very fortunate to receive instructions. Prabhupada says, what is called our Prabhu Datta Desh. Have you heard of that statement? The Prabhu Datta Desh means the place in which one is ordered to do service. All right. Now that's based on steady sadhaka. He's a steady sadhaka. Now, I want you to, do this or do that or do the other thing. I want you to stay in Chicago and not that I'm just, as an example. Or I want you to stay in Chicago and work with Nityananda Pran. Still, it would be good for him. That's the circumstance. Krishna's made that arrangement. So, there's that humorous story of how, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was told to go to China. He was being problematic at the time, and there was quite a rift in ISKCON in America, certainly between the householders and the sannyasis. There was and so then, Tamal Krishna Maharaj came to Srila Prabhupada in a very apologetic mood and said, I might as well go to China to preach. And then Prabhupada said, yeah, that's a good idea, that's what you should do. So, and that was a great challenge, for him. But he took it. You can see what a wonderful disciple of Srila Prabhupada he was, he took that instruction very, very seriously, and then started preaching there. So at a certain point, the Guru may be giving instructions, understanding the nature of the disciple, and modifying them somewhat to elevate them up to that point of steadiness. But then once the devotee, the disciple is understood to be steady, then the Guru can give instructions that are, not watered down and not soft, sugar-coated. May even chastise the disciple on occasion. Right? How does that sound?
Really beautiful answer, actually. And quick clarification, when you say steady, are you referring to in the process of devotion, the stage of nishtha? Are you saying that...
No, he just gets up in the morning and chants his rounds and goes to the program and does what he's told. Right? But it may also be, that is the beginning of nishtha. Right? That's the beginning of nishtha. Nishtha can manifest at any stage, even as a young devotee. That's what we call fixed up. That doesn't mean that there aren't anarthas that need to be removed still, anatta nivritti. Because, these different stages of the progressive development of Shraddha can manifest. Even Lord Chaitanya is very merciful. He's like a salesman, sometimes gives away his wares for free, just to give people a taste. So we're in the kirtan, sometimes we're jumping up and down and we're feeling great ecstasy. Right? Because Lord Chaitanya sometimes gives away his prema. He gives it just to encourage us. So even in the neophyte stage, we can experience prema. Right? So nishtha is not so elevated that we can't experience it. As long as we stick to the instructions and we follow. Anything else, Luke?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Here is a question. Krishna is revealed or Krishna is perceived in three forms, three different ways, like Brahma, Paramatma and Bhagavan.
Yes.
So again, in Ishopanishad, it is stated that means when a devotee tries to see that Hiranyamaya Patrena, that means his face is so dazzling, means a devotee cannot see, he will become blind. And my question is how to perceive the form of Bhagavan. Other two forms, like you say, like Brahma and Paramatma, they are stuck by the yogis or those who are after knowledge. But for devotees, how to perceive that Bhagavan form?
The Bhagavan form?
Yes.
He's over here. Come to greet the deities in the morning. He's there. That's how we do it. Just see how Prabhupada has elevated us so that we can see Bhagavan every day. Chant Hare Krishna, you can see him. Right? That's actually our main method for seeing Krishna is chanting our rounds. That's our main method. Then everything else we see as connected with Krishna. And we can appreciate Krishna's presence in our service, in our daily interactions, in the association with the devotees. So many wonderful experiences we can relish when we chant our rounds properly. Then when we see the deities, we don't see marble, we see Krishna. So many ways of seeing Krishna, and especially when they're connected or they're purified, fine-tuned by the japa, then we start to see Krishna almost everywhere. Right? Only the devotees can understand this. Materialistic people can't. And how is it? It's by direct perception. What is it? Raja Vidya Rajaguyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam. Right? Pavitram Idam Uttamam. This process is pure and transcendental. Right? Pratyakshavagamam dhamyam. By direct perception. It is the perfection of religion because it gives direct perception of the self. So, how do we see? We see Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajjatam Pritipurvakam Dadami. Krishna gives us the capacity to see him. Right? So how do we see? Not that we see, but Krishna reveals himself. Right? Tesham Evanukam Paratam Mahamma Jnana Jam Tamaha Nasyam Yatma Bhavasto Jnana Deepena Basvata. Out of compassion for them, I, dwelling within the heart, destroy the darkness of ignorance by the lamp of transcendental knowledge. So Krishna reveals himself to us. How does he do that? Or how do we do that? We do that by rendering service. Then he reveals himself. That's how we see Krishna. Not that we see Krishna, Krishna shows himself to us. How does that sound? So that's how we recognize, that's how we appreciate the Bhagavan aspect. Even in washing the pots. Right? Or sweeping the floor. And there are other ways. You know, we were just reading the other day in the Bhagavad Gita, there's the 7th chapter, the 10th chapter. You know, how to see Krishna within the material. I am the heat and the light of the sun and the moon. I am the ability in man. I am the seed, generating principle. The taste in water. So many ways to appreciate Krishna's presence within everything. How does that sound? I think
I don't know if I got the story completely correct, but Srila Prabhupada was with some reporters in Rameshwar, and they asked Srila Prabhupada if he ever saw Krishna, and then Rameshwar Swami said, he is seeing through the eyes of Scripture, and Prabhupada says, no, I'm seeing Krishna all the time.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I didn't hear that. I guess I wasn't here.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. You just confirmed what I said. Thank you. They know I wasn't just making it up. Luke, I think.
Hare Krishna. I'm wondering...
You're wondering?
I'm wondering about, it seems, so we have this one example of Srila Prabhupada saying, I'm seeing Krishna all the time.
Yep.
Like, I'm thinking of one other story of a pastime where he was in the hospital. I think he had just had a stroke after the movement had gotten going, at least in San Francisco. And the devotees did the all-night kirtan, and Prabhupada told one of his disciples, I don't know Krishna, I only know my spiritual master.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have other stories of devotees, very advanced devotees, having this, displaying this same mood of extreme humility. I don't know Krishna, I'm not seeing Krishna. And then also stories of even Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord himself, he is feeling himself to be conditioned soul. So on the one hand, we have this purport which is a little bit different than the way I've heard, seeing Krishna. Like this verse in Brahma Samhita, Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena, one must have the eyes anointed with the love of God. It's a very exalted thing. He's such a devotee, he's also experiencing ecstatic symptoms. But then also, on the other end, we have the 10th chapter. You can see Krishna just by seeing the sun and thinking, oh, this is the eye of Vishnu.
Yeah.
So, I guess I was just looking for some clarification because it seems not useful to be thinking oneself to be seeing the Lord. Maybe that's just my own kind of understanding. Like it's not spiritually progressive.
It's like he's got schizophrenia. 1 minute he says he's seeing Krishna. The next minute he says, I don't see Krishna. So, hang on a second. Are you seeing Krishna? You're not. Simultaneously seeing Krishna and not seeing Krishna. Because, first of all, Krishna reveals himself. And so we're not actually seeing Krishna, but Krishna is revealing himself. And, Krishna's presence is sometimes felt and sometimes not. And when his presence is not felt, then the devotee feels the inadequacy and they're conscious of their inability and their disqualification. And so then, in that state of mind, humility manifests. But of course that humility is very attractive to Krishna. And so when the devotee very humbly serves, then Krishna reveals himself. So then the devotee says, then he's inspired. But then Krishna may also not reveal himself. And so then the devotee is feeling very meek and mild and says, I don't know Krishna, I don't understand Krishna. Right, in a state of humility. But of course, we know that even in that humble state of mind, and especially we can see in Prabhupada's statements, I only know my spiritual master. That's reinforcing what's actually being said here. He's still serving his spiritual master, and so therefore Prabhupada says, if he's serving his spiritual master, here he says, he immediately associates with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So even when a devotee says, in humility, I don't know Krishna, I don't know anything, we can see by his behaviour and by what he says and what he does, that actually he is seeing Krishna, but seeing Krishna in that humble mood, in that mood of humility, and in always maintaining that service attitude, and maintaining that connection with his spiritual master. So I think the contradictions can be resolved in that understanding. It appears contradictory. It reminds me of the story of Ramchandra Puri and Manavendra Puri, who on his deathbed was lamenting, I couldn't see the Lord of Mathura, quoting a verse from the Bhagavatam, in the mood of Srimati Radharani. Ramchandra Puri, his disciple, came along and said, stop lamenting. Just meditate on the Brahman. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nasochati Nakanchati, He just didn't understand the mood of his guru. And so his spiritual master said, get out of here, I don't want to ever see you ever again. Because you don't know, you don't understand. This is not material lamentation, this is spiritual. And it is not of the material world, but of the spiritual world. So, understanding the mood of a devotee requires an amount of advancement on the part of the observer, so that one can see beyond the external and look at the internal and understand what's happening in the internal. And even then it may be difficult to understand. There's a verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that says that the mind of a Vaishnava is actually impossible to understand. Right? So, there's some subtleties there that need to be meditated on and churned a little bit. You had another comment?
When you mentioned, Prabhu, that in the two texts a word was changed,
Yeah.
It reminded me of in the 10 offenses and how they're written in the Nectar of Instruction and how they're written in two different temple books, and one of them has one or two changes and the other has 6 or 7, and I'm just wondering about the process of how Prabhupada's language, his words or phrases are changed, and if there's any regulation of that process. And
go to the BBT website and there's some explanations. This new version of the Bhagavad Gita is closer to the original manuscript that Srila Prabhupada created in the writing of the Bhagavad Gita. So there is a history and it's being recorded by the BBT. As far as temple songbooks and, that's probably just somebody's taken the liberty of making some finer adjustments. Neither here nor there, I would think. Look, the only reason why I read that the seed slokas, and then I realised that wasn't the sloka that I learnt, from the Bhagavad Gita that I was reading in 1978 or whenever it was. So that's why I wanted to check it. But I have full faith in Dravida and the devotees at the BBT that whatever Bhagavad Gita they're giving us now is more faithful to Prabhupada than some of the earlier, the Macmillan version of the Bhagavad Gita has just got some ridiculous, mistakes in it. There are sentences that do not make sense. They're not even grammatically correct. And yet there are those who say, we should stick to the, Prabhupada's original. Whereas actually that's not Prabhupada's original, that's the person who was doing the typing fell asleep. Or something. There's just one sentence. I think it's the last sentence in the second purport to the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It just does not make sense. You can divide, you can read it to people and say, tell me what this means. Now, if somebody can make sense out of it, that means they don't know what they're talking about. That's why I checked it. Not because I have any objection to them making any changes. I was just curious. I've been reciting the translation to Tesham Satata Yuktanam in a particular way, and then I said, hang on a second, they've changed it. So now I'll change. Maybe. Yes, Prabhu. The original 10 offences are in the Nectar of Devotion, in my mind.
So that mood you were talking about is...
Which one?
Well, the mood of The story that you were telling about, I forget who the Prabhu was, but he was lamenting. He's like, I have not seen the Lord of Mathura.
Yeah.
And then his devotee, his disciple was saying, stop lamenting.
Yeah.
Focus on the Bhagavan, the Paramatman. So that mood to understand things, or just mood in general, how we develop mood. Would you say
the mission?
What happened?
The mission. Yeah, the mood and mission.
The mood of the mission. Would you say that mood develops naturally, or is there something that we should meditate on in order to develop that mood correctly and develop that mood in such a way that it...
Well, one of the themes of the VTE, the Vaishnava Training and Education, one of the themes of the Bhakti Shastri, which is the study of the Bhagavad Gita and the Nectar of Devotion and the, Upanishad and Nectar of Instruction, isn't it? Those 4 books. One of the themes is to understand the mood and mission of Srila Prabhupada. And so it can be studied, and it's certainly not a bad thing to do, but it's often just picked up by associating with ISKCON devotees and understanding, what was Prabhupada's mood, that he emphasised that a superior Vaishnava is one who goes out of their way to preach and to give others Krishna, give others an opportunity to engage in devotional service. And, in order to do that, book distribution has a very high place. Prasadam distribution, chanting Hare Krishna. These are the things that we do as members of ISKCON to fulfill the mission of the society. So we'll pick those things up by association, but it certainly doesn't hurt to study courses like the Bhakti Shastri, which focus on that topic specifically, and in a thematic way look at Prabhupada's teachings and then extract from those teachings instructions that emphasise Prabhupada's mood and mission. So it certainly doesn't hurt to read with that mood, or with that understanding. What is Prabhupada's mood and mission in this text? What do you think is Prabhupada's mood in this purport? Tell me. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Okay, it's the mood of full surrender and humility to the guru, but also to the immediate structure of authority. And that's something recently I've been learning too. It's just realizing the immediate structure of authority and realizing, like you were saying yesterday, the guru's all around, the guru's everywhere. And
well, I didn't say he's everywhere, but he can manifest in a few different forms.
And in many different forms.
Yeah.
And humbly submitting to those authorities and to those gurus. And then in that way, through that humility, then we can see Krishna.
Yeah. That good? 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10?
Yeah.
What's the other 3?
Huh?
Can you fill in the other 3?
No, it's just that you don't give full marks to the student all the time.
Oh, well, I appreciate it.
Otherwise they start thinking, I'm a 10 out of 10. I'm pretty good. Okay, I think we should finish here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.